right. Good afternoon, Interim Chief Bell. I'm Rob Kittredge, acting for the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms at these hearings. And I have just a few questions for you today. And to show my hand a little bit, they're all geared at, as you say, fleshing out and discussing the necessity of invoking the Emergencies Act. I'd like to show with these questions that under your leadership, the OPS was quite capable of clearing the process, even if the Federal Emergencies Act was never invoked. So, as I understand your testimony today, you identified 4 ways in which the invocation of the Emergencies Act may have been helpful to police in clearing the protests. First, it streamlined the swearing in of officers from other jurisdictions. Second, it made it easier to procure towing services. And third, the power to freeze financial accounts may have led some protesters to leave Ottawa voluntarily. Is that a fair characterization of your first 3 points?
Yes, but I don't believe I said may have been helpful. I believe I indicated it was helpful.
Which one? The power to freeze?
All of them. Okay. All of them were helpful.
I'll admit a little editorial work on my part there. So things were a little bit rushed at the end of your time with Commission Counsel earlier, and I want to make sure that I properly understand your 4th and final point, which was basically you said something like the invocation of the Act created a solid legal framework within which police could do their work. Am I understanding you correctly to think that the framework that you're referring to there meant the power to create an exclusion zone?
That is correct.
Okay. So going to your first point, streamlining the swearing in of officers from other jurisdictions, Acting Deputy Chief Ferguson testified that saved a few hours and some paperwork. Would you agree with that testimony?
No, and not to contradict Deputy Chief Ferguson, but as my role of CAO, one of my responsibilities was the processing of those swearing-ins. It is a much more labor-intensive administrative process that has several checks and balances and layers to it. So I personally wouldn't describe it in hours. I would describe it in normally days. It likely could be streamlined into 24 hours, but there are a lot of people you have to line up to be able to do that. All
right. So in short, though, it could likely have been done in 24 hours.
Well, it could likely have been done in 24 hours, but I don't think the benefit was as to when it could get done. I think the benefit was that as soon as a member was boots on the ground in Ottawa, landed in Ottawa, they were operationally ready to be deployed, and that's what we needed as we were bringing members in from across the country.
But you don't dispute that those officers could have been sworn in without emergency powers, do you?
Oh no, they absolutely could have been sworn in without it. It just could have created a backlog in lag time,
right,
particularly with the number of officers we were bringing to the city from all across the country.
All right. So in this regard, though, the invocation of the Emergencies Act was helpful to police, but not necessary, strictly speaking. Is that fair to say?
It was helpful to us, yes.
All right. Thank you. Your second point, making it easier to access towing services. In the end, emergency powers were not used to compel any tow truck drivers to provide services, were they?
I don't know that. So that's a better question directed at Superintendent Bernier, who directly interacted on that.
Fair enough. And he is expected to testify to the effect that emergency powers were not needed to compel towing companies to supply trucks or drivers because by February 13th, the OPP had retained 34 tow trucks with willing drivers. Do you agree with that?
I'll let him to testify to that. I don't know that.
But you wouldn't have any reason to dispute that if that's what he testifies?
If that's what he testifies to, yes.
All right. And I guess just to cut to the chase here again, the invocation of the Emergencies Act might have been helpful, but was not necessary to police with regard to obtaining towing services. Is that fair to say?
Again, I can't comment on that because I don't know the structure or the challenges that were occurred to towing. That was a planning responsibility.
All right, but if it was not used, in fact, you would, like if it turns out...
This is like the 4th time you're going at that same question, so
Okay, all right, fair enough, I'll move on. On your third point, the idea that the power to freeze financial accounts may have incentivized protesters to leave Ottawa voluntarily, you don't have any direct knowledge of that, do you?
No, I do not.
And same with the point put to you by Canada's counsel that the freezing order may have deterred some people from coming to Ottawa to join the
I
protest.
don't have any direct knowledge
All
of
right.
that.
And so you have no direct knowledge of the power to freeze financial accounts being necessary to the clearing of the protest then, I guess.
No, I do not.
You speculate that perhaps it helped, but
Yes.
okay, thank you. And on your final point, the power to create an exclusion zone, there are other non-emergency powers police could have used to exclude people from the area, weren't there?
Yes, there were.
Yes. And so here again, the emergency power to create an exclusion zone may have been helpful and may have been very helpful to police, but it wasn't strictly speaking necessary, was it?
The exclusionary zone and the powers granted around it were very clear. There was no debate about them. And that's what we leveraged to actually execute our plan. The need for the exclusionary zone was very important because we needed to be able to limit the movement of pedestrians in and out of that area. That is an uncommon authority that police exercise. So the ability for us to be very clear in how we were managing, striking up, and excluding people from that zone was extremely important to us to be able to execute the plans that we did.
Right, but in the absence of the invocation of the Emergencies Act, the OPS would have been able to clear the protests.
In the absence of the invocation of the Emergencies Act, the OPS, the OPP, the RCMP, as part of Unified Command, were going to clear the protests.
All right, well, thank you very much. Those are my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.